Shave her head. Let this little girl learn she's nothing here." The order thundered across Fort Ironclad's parade ground as the 28-year-old recruit with an empty file stood frozen before 300 soldiers. No rank, no history, just a ghost in faded fatigues. She didn't flinch as the clippers touched her scalp, accepting it like an old ritual, not punishment. Then General Theodore Vance's tablet unlocked a classified file that made his hands shake violently. He screamed words that stopped every heart on that base. "Stand down. That woman outranks everyone here, including me. If you want to see how this satisfying story unfolds, subscribe to my channel and follow until the end. Comment which city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has traveled." The transport truck groaned to a stop at the gates of Fort Ironclad, and Celine Ashford stepped down onto gravel that crunched like broken promises beneath her boots. She carried nothing but a plain duffel bag. Her hair hung in a simple ponytail, no style, no shine. Just practical. The kind of woman you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting her. That was exactly what she wanted. A guard at the checkpoint squinted at her papers, then laughed. "Another one for the grinder," he said to his partner. "Give her 3 days." Celine didn't respond. She walked through the gates with her shoulders relaxed, her breathing steady, her eyes scanning everything and revealing nothing. Fort Ironclad had a reputation. They called it the career graveyard, the place where the military sent soldiers they wanted to break. Some people said it was a training facility. People who'd been there knew better. It was a machine designed to crush human beings. And Celine Ashford had just walked straight into its teeth. The intake office smelled like stale coffee and old sweat. Sergeant Major Drake Hollister sat behind a metal desk, his boots propped up on a stack of files he'd never read. He was a big man, thick through the shoulders, with hands that had broken more than a few recruits over the years. He liked breaking people. Women, especially. When Celine stepped through the door, he didn't bother to sit up. "Name," he said, not looking at her. "Ashford, Celine." He flipped open her file. 1 page. Just her name and transfer orders. Nothing else. Hollister's eyebrows rose. Then he laughed a harsh bark that bounced off the concrete walls. "Well, well," he said, finally looking at her. "Look what the wind blew in. You got a file thinner than toilet paper, sweetheart. No commendations, no prior postings, no nothing." He slammed the folder shut and pointed at her. "You know what that tells me? That tells me you're nobody. A ghost. A waste of government resources." Celine stood at attention, her face completely blank. "I'm here to train Sergeant Major." Hollister stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walked around the desk until he was close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Train," he laughed again. "Sweetheart, you're here to fail, and I'm going to enjoy every minute of it." He grabbed her file and threw it at her chest. "Barracks C. Last bunk. Try not to cry yourself to sleep on the first night." The barracks was exactly what she expected. Rows of metal bunks recruits scattered around in various states of readiness. They looked up when she walked in, and the whispers started immediately. "Fresh meat. Look at that hair. She think this is a beauty pageant." $20 says she's gone by Friday. Celine found her assigned bunk in the corner. The mattress was soaked water pooling on the rusty frame. Her locker door hung off its hinges, twisted like someone had taken a crowbar to it. A bucket still rolled on the floor nearby. She didn't ask who did it. She didn't complain. She just set her duffel bag on the wet concrete and started stripping the bed. A woman with bleached hair and a tattoo crawling up her neck walked over arms crossed. "That's my welcome gift," she said. Hope you appreciate the effort." Celine wrung out the sheets with hands that looked deceptively delicate. "Noted," she said. The woman laughed. "That's it." "Noted. What are you, a robot?" "Just tired," Celine said. "Long trip." She spread the soaked sheets back on the frame, then lay down on them without a blanket, without a pillow. Her eyes closing like this was the most comfortable bed she'd ever slept in. The bleached woman stared at her for a long moment. "You're weird," she finally said. "I'm going to enjoy watching them break you." Celine didn't respond. She was already asleep. Or at least that's what she wanted them to think. Morning came with a bugle call that split the air like a scream. Celine was already awake. Had been for 2 hours. Her uniform was pressed perfectly despite spending the night on a wet mattress, every crease sharp enough to cut paper. The other recruits stumbled out of bed, cursing and groaning. They looked at her standing there fully dressed, fully ready, and something flickered in their eyes. Confusion. Maybe a little fear. "How the hell did you—" the bleached woman started. "Mess hall opens in 10 minutes, Celine said, walking toward the door. "You might want to hurry." The mess hall was crowded and loud, the smell of grease and burned coffee thick in the air. Celine grabbed a tray and moved down the serving line. The server looked at her, then glanced at someone behind her. A small nod. When the ladle hit her tray, it deposited a watery gray slop that might have been oatmeal in a past life. Everyone else got eggs and toast. Celine moved on without comment. She found an empty spot at the end of a long table and sat down. The moment she did, the recruits on either side of her got up and moved away. She lifted her spoon. A boot shot out from across the aisle, catching her shin. She saw it coming. She could have avoided it easily. Instead, she let herself stumble just a little. Just enough to seem human. But then someone shoved her hard from behind, and the tray went flying. Gray slop splattered across the floor. The hall went silent for one perfect moment. Then the laughter started. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Greer stood at the officers' table watching. He was a lean man with wire-rimmed glasses, and the expression of someone who had calculated exactly how much suffering he could inflict while staying within regulations. He pointed at Celine with a gloved finger. "Clean it up, recruit. And you don't get seconds. Maybe next time you'll learn to walk before you try to eat." Celine knelt on the floor, wiping up the mess with napkins, while the laughter grew louder around her. Her stomach was empty. Her face was calm. And her eyes were cataloging every single person who was laughing. The afternoon sun turned the training yard into a furnace. 300 recruits stood in formation, sweating through their uniforms. Celine stood at the end of the last row, her posture straight, but not stiff hands at her sides. Sergeant Major Hollister walked down the line, his presence like a thundercloud. He stopped in front of Celine. "You know what I hate most about this job," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Paperwork. And you, sweetheart, are paperwork waiting to happen." He held up her file. "1 page. 1 goddamn page. You know what that means. No sergeant major. It means either you're so useless nobody bothered to write anything down, or—" He paused, enjoying the moment. "Actually, no. There's no or. You're just useless." The recruits snickered. Hollister leaned closer. "I'm going to enjoy making you quit," he whispered. "I'm going to enjoy it very much." The obstacle course stretched across the north end of the base, a brutal gauntlet of walls, trenches, rope climbs, and mud pits. Celine lined up with the other recruits, waiting for the signal. Hollister stood by the water station, a high-pressure hose in his hands, the kind they used for cleaning tanks. The whistle blew. Celine took off running, her pace steady and efficient. She hit the first wall, pulled herself over, dropped into the trench on the other side. She was fast, faster than she was letting herself appear. But when she reached the rope climb, Hollister was waiting. The hose hit her full in the face. The pressure was like a solid punch, snapping her head back, threatening to tear her grip from the slick ropes. Water flooded her nose, her mouth, her lungs. A normal person would have fallen. Celine locked her legs around the webbing and kept climbing. Blind. Drowning. But climbing. She crested the top, gasping, and dropped down the other side. Hollister smiled. "Disqualified!" Lieutenant Colonel Greer's voice rang out from the observation platform. "Improper foothold on the rope climb. Time doesn't count." Celine stood at attention, water streaming down her face. "Yes, sir." "Do it again." She ran the course 3 times. Each time something went wrong. A foothold, a hand position, a technicality so minor it barely existed. Each time her score was erased. By the 3rd run, her lungs were burning, and her legs were shaking with tremors she refused to acknowledge. She crossed the finish line, and her knees buckled. For one moment, she was on all 4s in the dirt. Then she stood up, slowly, painfully, but completely upright. Greer made a note on his clipboard. "Marginal," he said. "Barely adequate." Hollister laughed. "Told you," he said to the recruits who were watching. "This is what happens when they send us charity cases. She'll be gone by week's end." Celine wiped the mud from her face and walked back to the barracks. Her hands weren't shaking. Her eyes were clear. And somewhere deep inside her, a clock was ticking. Gear inspection came next. The recruits stood at attention beside their equipment, everything laid out in precise military order. Greer walked down the line, checking each station with his clipboard. When he reached Celine, he didn't even look at her gear. He just kicked her pack over. Everything she owned scattered into the dust. "Defective arrangement," he said. "Implies a defective soldier." He picked up her field radio, an old heavy model compared to the newer tech everyone else carried. "Outdated equipment," he said. Then he dropped it. The casing cracked against the concrete. "Defective equipment," he said, making a note. "Demerit." Celine stared at the broken radio, then looked up at him. "That radio was issued to me, sir." "Are you arguing with me, recruit?" "No, sir." "Good. Now pack everything up. You have 10 seconds. It was impossible. Physically impossible. She did it in 12. "Failed," Greer said. "You'll carry the squad's extra ammunition crates for the rest of the day. Consider it a learning experience." The ammunition crates weighed 80 pounds combined. Celine hoisted them onto her shoulders without a groan and marched at the back of the formation. The straps dug deep into her muscles. By the 2nd hour, they had broken skin. Blood soaked her collar dark red against the faded green of her uniform. No one offered to help. No one even looked at her. She kept marching. Night brought a different kind of test. Celine was in her bunk eyes closed, breathing steady. To anyone watching, she was deeply asleep. She wasn't. The footsteps came at 0200. 4 sets, moving quietly, but not quietly enough. She heard the flashlights click on, saw the red glow through her eyelids, heard the sound of soap bars being wrapped in towels. "Do it fast," someone whispered. "She won't even know what hit her." Celine waited until the first arm was mid-swing. Then she moved. Her hand shot out and caught the lead attacker's wrist, her fingers finding the nerve cluster with practiced precision. She applied pressure just enough, and he dropped to his knees with a choked gasp. The soap-wrapped towel clattered to the floor. Celine sat up slowly. The other 3 attackers froze their flashlights, wavering. She looked at them. just looked. Her eyes caught the moonlight coming through the window, and for one moment they didn't look human. They looked like something you'd see in a nature documentary about predators. "You have two choices," she said, her voice quiet and calm. "You can leave now, or you can find out what happens when I stop being polite." Nobody moved. She released the lead attacker's wrist. He scrambled backward, nursing his arm, his face white with shock. "Go," Celine said. They went. She lay back down and closed her eyes. Sleep came easily. It always did. Tomorrow would be worse. The letter arrived with the morning mail call. Hollister stood at the center of the yard, sorting through envelopes with theatrical slowness. "Miller package from Mommy, Johnson. Your girlfriend still remembers you exist." He paused at one envelope. "Well, well," he said, holding it up. "Looks like somebody out there actually cares about our little ghost." He walked toward Celine, waving the envelope. "What is this, a love letter? A plea to come home? Maybe a note from Daddy saying he's proud of you?" Celine's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let me guess," Hollister continued. "This is from someone who still thinks you're worth something." He produced a lighter. "Too bad they're wrong." He lit the corner of the envelope. The paper caught immediately orange flames licking up toward the address. Celine watched the fire consume the letter that contained the last words of a fallen squadmate. The letter she had been carrying from base to base for 3 years, waiting for a permanent posting where she could finally read it in peace. She watched it burn, and she didn't move, didn't cry, didn't beg. When the ashes fell to the dirt, she stepped on them, burying the memory to protect it from their mockery. Hollister looked disappointed. "Huh," he said. "Thought for sure that would do it." He walked away, already looking for his next target. Celine stood perfectly still, the ashes beneath her boot. Something had shifted in her eyes. Something cold. Something patient. Something that was keeping very careful count. The punishment came that afternoon. "Recruit Ashford failed to salute with proper crispness this morning," Greer announced to the formation. "Therefore, the entire platoon will run 10 miles in full gear." The hatred was immediate. "Are you kidding me? This is her fault. I'm going to kill that witch." They ran, 10 miles under the blazing sun, full packs on their backs. Every few minutes, someone would throw an elbow into Celine's ribs. A boot would scrape down her heels. Spit-filled insults hit her ears between gasps for air. "This is your fault. You're dead when this is over. Should have quit while you had the chance." At mile 7, someone shoved her hard toward a drainage ditch. She recovered with a rotational step that kept her moving forward. At mile 9, her legs were screaming. At mile 10, she crossed the finish line first. The same people who hated her had been forced to match her pace, and they hated her even more for it. The tactical simulation was supposed to be her final humiliation. The recruits lined up in the shooting range, rifles at the ready. Celine checked her weapon. Something was wrong. The firing pin had been filed down. The rifle would jam after every shot. She looked up at the observation booth where Greer stood with his clipboard. He was smiling. The simulation began. Targets popped up across the range. Celine pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. Around her, the other recruits were firing steadily, racking up points. Her rifle was useless. Greer's voice came over the loudspeaker, dripping with satisfaction. "Weapon malfunction, dead recruit walking." Celine dropped to one knee. Her hands moved faster than conscious thought. In 4 seconds, she had stripped the bolt assembly, cleared the jam, and reassembled the weapon. She started firing. 1 shot. Manual cycle. 1 shot. Manual cycle. Each bullet found its target. Center mass. Perfect placement. Her fingers were bleeding from the rapid bolt manipulation, but she didn't stop. The score counter climbed higher and higher. Greer's smile disappeared. He cut the power to the targets. "Simulation malfunction," he announced. "All scores voided." Celine's perfect performance disappeared from the digital board. 0 points. She looked up at the booth. Greer stared back. Something passed between them. A recognition. He had just realized that she wasn't what she appeared to be, and she had just confirmed that they would never let her win fairly. The wound happened on the obstacle course the next day. A rusty edge, hidden in the shadows of the wall, climb sliced deep into her forearm. Blood poured from the gash, bright red against her skin. She reported to the medical tent. The medic took one look at her, then glanced at Hollister, who was sitting in the corner drinking coffee. "Stop wasting resources on scratches," the medic said, tossing her a roll of gauze. "We've got real soldiers to take care of." He turned his back. Celine walked out of the tent. She found a quiet spot behind the latrines. She pulled out her repair kit. A needle. Thread. No anesthesia. No antiseptic. She cleaned the wound with water from her canteen. Then she began to stitch. The needle pierced her skin, in and out, in and out. Her hands didn't shake. She tied off the knots with her teeth. Blood dripped onto the dirt between her boots. When she was done, she rolled her sleeve down over the fresh stitches and walked back to formation. Nobody noticed she had been gone. The test came without warning. Greer dragged a terrified recruit out of the line, a skinny kid named Jensen, who couldn't have weighed more than 140 pounds soaking wet. "This one is weak," Greer announced. "He's holding the unit back. He needs to learn a lesson." He shoved Jensen toward Celine. "Break his nose, recruit. That's an order." The platoon went silent. Jensen looked at Celine with eyes full of terror. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't." Celine looked at Jensen. She looked at Greer. She lowered her hands to her sides. "No, sir." The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Greer's face went red. "What did you say to me?" "I said, no, sir. I will not strike a teammate." "That's a direct order, recruit." "Then it's an unlawful order, sir. I refuse." The silence that followed was deafening. Greer's hand moved faster than anyone expected. He punched Jensen himself a brutal blow that sent the kid sprawling into the dirt, blood pouring from his nose. Then he turned on Celine. "Insubordination," he hissed, his voice shaking with rage. "Direct refusal of a lawful order. You're finished." Hollister stepped forward, circling her like a shark scenting blood. "You know what, sir? I think I know exactly what this one needs." He grabbed a strand of hair that had come loose from her ponytail. "Look at this," he said, yanking it just hard enough to sting. "Training with this mop on her head. She thinks this is a beauty pageant." The crowd murmured. "Yeah," someone shouted. "Shave it off. Make her look like a real soldier." Hollister grinned. "You hear that, little girl? The people have spoken." He signaled to an aide who brought out the clippers. The buzz filled the air like an angry swarm. "Time to strip away the pretty," Hollister said. "Time to show everyone what you really are." Celine stepped forward before they could grab her. She sat down on the metal stool they had dragged out, her hands folded in her lap. Her eyes stared straight ahead. She didn't resist. She didn't beg. She just sat there perfectly still as the clippers descended toward her head. And somewhere in the back of her mind, behind the cold mask, she wore a voice whispered, "Remember this moment. Remember every face. Remember every laugh. The reckoning is coming, and it will be magnificent." The first clump of hair hit the dirt like a fallen bird. Celine didn't move. didn't flinch. She sat on that metal stool with her hands folded in her lap, her spine straight as a rifle barrel, while Hollister worked the clippers across her scalp with deliberate slowness. He wanted her to break. He wanted tears. He wanted screaming. She gave him nothing. "Look at this, everyone," Hollister announced, holding up a fistful of dark hair. "This is what happens when you think you're special. This is what happens when you show up at my base with a blank file and an attitude." The recruits watched in silence. Some of them were smiling. Others looked away uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, but too afraid to speak. The clippers buzzed again, another strip of hair falling away. "You know what I love about this job," Hollister said, leaning close to her ear. "I love watching people realize they're not who they thought they were. I love watching the moment when everything they believed about themselves just disappears." Celine's eyes stayed fixed on a point in the distance. "Are you even listening to me, recruit?" "Yes, Sergeant Major." "Then say something. Tell me how much you hate this. Tell me you want to quit." "I'm here to train, Sergeant Major." He grabbed her jaw, forcing her head to the side. "You're here because nobody else wanted you. You're here because you're garbage, and this is where garbage ends up." She met his eyes, and for just a moment something flickered in her gaze that made him hesitate. Something that didn't belong there. Then it was gone, and she was just another recruit being humiliated in front of her peers. Hollister released her jaw and went back to work with the clippers. 2 MPs had been standing nearby, and now they moved forward, grabbing Celine's shoulders and forcing her head down. They twisted her arm behind her back, applying pressure that would have made most people scream. She adjusted her breathing and relaxed her muscles, negating the torque. "Hold her still." Hollister laughed. "Don't let the little lady squirm." He kicked the legs of the stool, making it wobble. Celine had to use her core strength to stay balanced, while the guards leaned their full weight on her. The clippers continued their work. More hair fell, and fell, and fell. Lieutenant Colonel Greer walked closer, his clipboard in hand. "Spirits appear weak," he said, making a note. "Subject shows signs of emotional suppression, likely to break within 48 hours. Celine heard every word. She filed it away with everything else. The bleached woman from the barracks pushed to the front of the crowd. "Hey, robot girl," she called out. "Still feeling tough? Still feeling special?" No response. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or did they shave that off too?" Laughter rippled through the formation. Hollister finished with the clippers and stepped back to admire his work. Celine's head was bare now, pale skin exposed to the harsh sunlight. "Stand up," he ordered. She stood. He shoved a small mirror at her. "Take a look, nobody. See what you really are." Celine glanced at the mirror. Her reflection stared back at her, a stranger with a shaved head and empty eyes. She handed the mirror back. "Done?" she asked. Hollister's face twisted. He had expected something. Anything. Tears, rage, despair. He got nothing. "Not quite," he said, and gestured to Greer. The lieutenant colonel smiled. "Recruit Ashford, you are hereby assigned to permanent latrine duty for the remainder of your training. You will also serve as the unit's gear carrier ammunition bearer and general labor pool. Any questions?" "No, sir." "Good. Now get out of my sight." Celine walked away from the stool, her bare scalp catching the light with each step. Behind her, someone spat on the ground. She kept walking. The sky had been darkening for the past hour, and now the first drops of rain began to fall. Cold rain. The kind that cuts through clothing and sinks into bones. Within minutes, it was a downpour. The recruits scattered, running for cover. The officers donned their waterproof ponchos. Celine stood in the middle of the parade ground, alone. The rain hit her exposed scalp like thousands of tiny needles, the cold shocking her system. Water streamed down her face, mixing with the loose hair still clinging to her shoulders, forming a grim paste that dripped onto her uniform. Hollister watched from under an overhang, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Look at that," he said to Greer. "Standing there like a drowned rat. Give it an hour. She'll be begging to quit." Greer nodded. "I've seen this before. The strong, silent types always break the hardest. When they finally crack, they shatter completely." They watched her for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. She didn't move. The rain continued to pour, the temperature dropping with each passing moment. Her uniform was soaked through, clinging to her body. Her lips had taken on a bluish tinge, but she stood there like a statue, like a monument, like something that had been standing in that exact spot for 1,000 years and would stand there for 1,000 more. Greer's smile faltered. "She's stubborn," he said. "I'll give her that." Hollister threw his cigarette into the mud. "Stubborn breaks just like everything else. You just have to know where to apply the pressure." The rain didn't let up for another hour. When it finally slowed to a drizzle, Celine was still standing there. Her body was shaking, now tiny tremors she couldn't fully control, but her eyes were clear, and she was still on her feet. Hollister walked out to her, his boots splashing through the puddles. "You think this proves something?" he asked. "You think standing in the rain makes you tough? No Sergeant Major. Then what was the point?" She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since she'd arrived. "The rain washes things away," she said quietly. "Dirt, blood, the things that don't matter. And what's left?" She didn't answer, but something in her expression made Hollister take a step back. Just one step, just for a moment. Then he caught himself, and his face hardened again. "Get to the latrines," he snarled. "You've got toilets to scrub." She walked past him without another word, and Hollister stood in the drizzle, watching her go with a feeling in his gut that he couldn't quite name. Something was wrong. Something about this recruit didn't add up. He shook off the feeling and headed back to the officers' quarters. It was probably nothing. The latrines were exactly as disgusting as they'd always been. Rows of toilets that hadn't been properly cleaned in weeks. The smell thick enough to taste. Celine got to work. She scrubbed in silence, her movements efficient and thorough. The work was humiliating, degrading, designed to break her spirit. She treated it like any other mission. After an hour, footsteps echoed behind her. She didn't turn around. "Hey, bald head," the bleached woman, 3 others with her. "We decided we're not done with you yet." Celine continued scrubbing. "Are you deaf? I said we're not done with you." "I heard you." "Then turn around and face me like a soldier." Celine stood slowly, the scrub brush still in her hand. The 4 women spread out, blocking the exit. "You think you're better than us," the bleached woman said. "You think because you don't cry and you don't complain that makes you special. But it doesn't. It just makes you a freak." "I never said I was better than anyone." "You don't have to say it. It's in everything you do, the way you walk, the way you look at us, like we're beneath you." Celine's grip tightened on the brush. "I'm just trying to get through training, same as everyone else." "No, not the same. Everyone else knows their place. Everyone else plays the game. But you—" The woman stepped closer. "You act like the rules don't apply to you." "Maybe they don't." The words came out before Celine could stop them. The bleached woman's eyes widened. "What did you just say?" Celine caught herself. Too much. She had revealed too much. Nothing. I didn't say anything. But it was too late. The first punch came fast, aimed at her face. Celine could have blocked it, could have redirected it, could have ended this confrontation in 3 seconds with 4 women on the floor. Instead, she let it connect. Her head snapped to the side, blood filling her mouth. "That's more like it," the bleached woman said. "Now you look like the rest of us." Another punch. A kick to the ribs. Celine went down, curling into a protective ball. She could have stopped this. She chose not to, not yet. Not until she understood exactly who she was dealing with. So she lay there and took it, cataloging each blow, each face, each voice. The beating lasted 3 minutes. When it was over, the 4 women stood over her, breathing hard. "Welcome to Fort Ironclad, freak," the bleached woman said. "This is just the beginning." They walked out, laughing. Celine lay on the concrete floor, her ribs aching, her face swelling. She waited until their footsteps faded. Then she stood up. Slowly, painfully, but completely upright. She walked to the sink and looked at her reflection. A black eye was forming. Blood trickled from a split lip. Her shaved head was marked with bruises. She smiled. It was a cold smile, a patient smile. The smile of someone who was playing a much longer game than anyone realized. She cleaned herself up as best she could and went back to scrubbing the toilets. The night brought no rest. At 0300, Celine woke to the sound of footsteps again. Different this time. Heavier. Male. 6 figures surrounded her bunk. Not 4. 6. And these weren't recruits with soap bars. These were grown men, their intentions written clearly in their postures. "Heard you took a beating earlier," one of them said. "Heard you just lay there and took it. We thought we'd see what else you'd just take." Celine sat up slowly. "You don't want to do this," she said. "Oh, but we do." The lead man reached for her, and something in Celine finally snapped. Her hand shot out, catching his wrist. She twisted, using his own momentum to flip him onto the bunk frame. His head cracked against the metal with a sound like a baseball hitting a bat. He went limp. The other 5 froze. "I said," Celine whispered, standing now, her body coiled like a spring. "You don't want to do this." One of them pulled a knife. Bad decision. Celine moved like water flowing around his thrust, catching his knife hand and rotating it with a precise motion that snapped his wrist. The knife clattered to the floor as he screamed. The third man threw a punch. She caught it, stepped inside his guard, and drove her palm into his solar plexus. He collapsed, gasping for air. 3 down. 3 to go. The remaining men looked at each other. "What the hell is she?" They ran. Celine stood in the darkness, surrounded by the groaning bodies of 3 men who had thought she was prey. She picked up the knife, examined it, set it carefully on the windowsill where it would be found in the morning. Then she stepped over the unconscious bodies and walked outside. The stars were bright overhead. She needed air. She needed to think. She had shown too much. Revealed too much. If word got back to Greer or Hollister about what had just happened, they would start asking questions she couldn't answer. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. She found a quiet spot behind the motor pool and sat down on an empty crate, her body still humming with adrenaline. 20 years. That's how long she had been doing this. Since she was 8 years old, when a military recruiter had seen something in her that no one else could see. Since the tests and the training and the endless missions that had turned her into something more than human. Something dangerous. Something valuable. Something that the military kept hidden from everyone, even itself. Her file wasn't empty because she was nobody. Her file was empty because what she really was couldn't be written down. And now she was here at this god-forsaken base, watching these petty tyrants abuse their power and destroy the soldiers under their command. She had seen enough. The report was already written in her head. But the mission wasn't about the report. The mission was about justice. And justice required patience. The next morning, Celine reported to formation with her bruised face and her black eye. Hollister noticed immediately. "What the hell happened to you?" "Fell down the stairs, Sergeant Major." He stared at her, knowing she was lying, not sure why. "You fall down a lot, sometimes, Sergeant Major." He glanced at Greer, who was watching with interest. "Maybe you should learn to walk better," Hollister finally said, moving on down the line. Behind him, 3 recruits were being carried to the medical tent on stretchers. Word had spread quickly about what had happened in the night. The official story was that they had gotten drunk and beaten each other up. Nobody believed it. But nobody could prove otherwise. And nobody wanted to ask the shaved woman with the empty file what had really happened. The fear had started. Celine could feel it in the way people looked at her now. The way they stepped aside when she walked past. The way conversations stopped when she entered a room. Good. Fear was useful. But it wasn't enough. She needed them to make a mistake, a big mistake, something that would justify everything she was about to do. And she knew exactly how to make it happen. That afternoon, during tactical exercises, Celine performed perfectly. Every shot, every maneuver, every test. She didn't hide her abilities anymore. She let them see glimpses of what she could really do, just enough to confuse them, just enough to make them nervous. Greer watched her score a perfect 50 out of 50 on the rifle range, his face growing paler with each bullseye. "Run that test again," he ordered. She scored perfect again. Again. Perfect again. He grabbed her rifle, examined it for modifications, found nothing. "Who trained you?" he demanded. "Basic training, sir. Same as everyone else." "That's impossible." She shrugged. "I'm a fast learner." Greer's eye twitched. He turned to Hollister, who was watching with crossed arms. "Something's wrong here," Greer said quietly. "Nobody comes out of nowhere and shoots like that." Hollister nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. Her file is too clean, too empty, like someone erased everything. Or like everything was classified." They looked at each other. "We should contact command," Greer said. "Ask for more information." Hollister shook his head. "And admit we might have made a mistake. No way. We handled this ourselves." "How?" Hollister smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "We push harder. We push until she breaks, or until she reveals what she's really hiding. Either way, we win." Greer nodded slowly. "And if she's actually something special, then we make sure nobody ever finds out what happened to her." They walked away, already planning. Celine watched them go, having heard every word from 30 feet away. Her hearing had always been exceptional, one of the many things not written in any file. She smiled to herself. They thought they were hunting her. They had no idea they were the prey. The trap was set. Now all she had to do was wait for them to walk into it. 3 days passed like knives. Hollister and Greer had declared open war on Celine Ashford, and they weren't bothering to hide it anymore. Every assignment, every drill, every moment of every day was designed to crush her. But something had shifted in the base. The recruits who had laughed at her shaving now walked wide circles around her bunk. The 3 men from the night attack had been transferred to medical facilities off base, their injuries too severe to explain away. And whispers traveled through the barracks like wildfire. "Did you hear what she did to Marcus? Broke his wrist with one hand. I heard she killed someone before. That's why her file is empty. She's not normal. Nobody's that calm under pressure." Celine heard all of it. She let them talk. Fear was a weapon, and she had learned long ago that the best weapons were the ones you didn't have to use. The morning formation brought a new development. General Theodore Vance was scheduled to arrive for a quarterly inspection in 48 hours, and the entire base had gone into panic mode. Greer stood before the assembled recruits, his voice carrying across the yard. The General's visit is an opportunity to showcase the excellence of this training facility. Every uniform will be pressed. Every weapon will be polished. Every recruit will perform at peak capacity. Is that understood? Yes, sir. His eyes found Celine in the formation. Some of you, he continued, have been disappointing. Some of you have failed to meet even the most basic standards. Those individuals will be confined to support duties during the General's visit. They will not be seen. They will not be heard. They will be invisible. He smiled at her. Do I make myself clear, Recruit Ashford? Crystal clear, sir. Good. Dismissed. The formation broke apart, but Hollister grabbed Celine's arm before she could move. Not you, he said. You're coming with me. He marched her across the base to a storage building that hadn't been used in years. The door groaned open, revealing a cramped space filled with broken equipment and forgotten supplies. Your quarters for the next 48 hours, Hollister said. You'll stay here until the General leaves. No contact with anyone. No food, no water. Just you and the rats. Celine looked around the space. And if I refuse... Hollister's hand shot out, grabbing her throat. He slammed her against the wall, his face inches from hers. Then I'll tell the General you attacked me. I'll tell him you're mentally unstable. I'll tell him whatever I have to tell him to make sure you disappear forever. His grip tightened. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? Celine didn't struggle, didn't fight back. She just looked at him with those empty eyes. I understand perfectly, Sergeant Major. He released her, stepping back. Good. Now get inside. She walked into the storage building without looking back. The door slammed shut behind her. The lock clicked. Darkness swallowed everything. Hollister stood outside for a moment, listening. No crying, no screaming, no pounding on the door, just silence. He shook his head and walked away, convinced he had finally won. He had no idea what he had just done. Inside the storage building, Celine stood perfectly still, letting her eyes adjust to the darkness. She had been in darker places, tighter spaces, more dangerous situations. This was nothing. She explored the room, methodically cataloging everything by touch. Broken chairs, rusted tools, old filing cabinets that hadn't been opened in decades. And there in the corner, exactly where she expected it to be, a ventilation shaft. She had memorized the building schematics 3 days ago. The shaft was small, barely wide enough for her shoulders, but she had trained in spaces half this size. She removed the grate, silently pulled herself up into the ductwork, and began to crawl. 20 minutes later, she emerged in the communications building. Empty, just as she knew it would be at this hour. She moved to the primary terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard. The encryption was military standard, the kind that would take most hackers weeks to crack. She was through in 4 minutes. The files she needed were buried, deep hidden behind layers of classification that most people didn't even know existed. Personnel records, financial transactions, internal communications. Everything Greer and Hollister had ever done was right there, documented in excruciating detail. She downloaded it all. Then she went deeper. Into the system that tracked her own file. There it was. The blank page that everyone had mocked. But attached to that blank page was a hyperlink that required Omega-7 clearance to access. She clicked it. Her real file opened. 73 pages of classified operations, commendations from generals who officially didn't exist. Training records that read like science fiction. And at the very top, a single notation asset class, Alpha Prime status, active authorization, direct presidential access only. She smiled. This was what they had been hiding from. This was what they would never see coming. She copied her own file to a secure external server, then erased all traces of her access. In 36 hours, when General Vance arrived, everything would be in place. She crawled back through the ventilation shaft, replaced the grate, and settled into a corner of the storage building to wait. 48 hours without food or water. She had done 96 once in a Syrian prison waiting for extraction. This was a vacation. The general arrived on schedule. His convoy rolled through the gates at 0800 sharp. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows and enough security to invade a small country. General Theodore Vance stepped out of the lead vehicle, his chest heavy with medals, his face set in the expression of a man who had seen everything and was impressed by nothing. Greer and Hollister met him at the parade ground, their salutes crisp, their uniforms immaculate. "General Vance, sir. Welcome to Fort Ironclad." "Lieutenant Colonel Greer, Sergeant Major Hollister." Vance nodded curtly. "I've heard interesting things about this facility." "All good, I hope, sir." "We'll see." The general's eyes swept across the assembled recruits. "I want to see your training records, performance metrics, disciplinary actions, everything." "Of course, sir. We have nothing to hide." Vance's aide, a young lieutenant named Chen, was already pulling out a tablet ready to take notes. "One more thing," Vance said. "I received an anonymous communication this morning. Something about a recruit with a classified file being held in isolation without authorization." Greer's face went pale. Hollister's jaw tightened. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, sir." "Really?" Vance pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Because according to this, you have a recruit named Ashford locked in a storage building without food or water. Is that true?" Silence. Greer's mind raced. How had anyone found out the building was on the far edge of the base? Nobody went there. Nobody knew. "Sir, I can explain. Get her, now!" Hollister moved fast, almost running across the base. He unlocked the storage building door and yanked it open, expecting to find Celine collapsed on the floor, dehydrated and broken. Instead, she was standing right there, waiting, clean, alert, her eyes clear and focused, like she had been expecting this exact moment. "Time to go?" she asked. Hollister grabbed her arm and marched her back to the parade ground, his mind spinning with questions he couldn't answer. General Vance watched them approach. His aide Lieutenant Chen was staring at his tablet, his face growing paler by the second. "Sir," Chen whispered. "Sir, you need to see this." "Not now. Sir, please." Something in Chen's voice made Vance pause. He took the tablet, glanced at the screen, and froze. His hand started shaking. "General?" Greer asked. "Is something wrong?" Vance looked up slowly. His eyes found Celine standing there in her dirty uniform, with her shaved head looking like every other broken recruit this base had ever produced. Except she wasn't. She wasn't anything like what they thought she was. "Lieutenant Colonel Greer," Vance said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What exactly have you been doing to this woman? Sir, she's just a recruit with disciplinary issues." "A recruit?" Vance laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. "Is that what you think she is? A recruit?" He turned the tablet around so Greer could see the screen. Greer's face went white. The file displayed on the screen was massive. Pages and pages of classified operations, commendations, awards, training certifications that didn't officially exist, and the clearance level at the top Omega-7, higher than Greer's, higher than Vance's, higher than almost anyone in the military. "Captain Celine Ashford," Vance read aloud, his voice carrying across the silent parade ground. Youngest officer to receive Alpha Prime designation. Author of the Crow Method Tactical Protocols. 17 confirmed solo operations in hostile territories. Direct liaison to the Joint Chiefs. And you... He looked at Greer with something like disgust. You shaved her head. You locked her in a storage building. You treated her like garbage. The silence that followed was absolute. Every recruit on that parade ground stood frozen, watching their commanding officers unravel. Hollister stepped forward, his face desperate. Sir, we didn't know. Her file was blank. There was nothing. Her file was classified, you idiot. It was blank because you didn't have the clearance to see it. Nobody at this base has the clearance to see it. I barely have the clearance to see it. Greer tried one more time. General, with all due respect, even if what you're saying is true, she still violated protocols. She still refused orders. She still what? Vance stepped closer, his voice rising. She still protected a recruit from being beaten. She still endured your abuse without complaint. She still performed at a level none of your people can match, even with sabotaged equipment and rigged tests. He pulled up another file on the tablet. I have her shooting scores, the real ones, not the ones you erased. I have footage from the obstacle course showing your people spraying her with fire hoses. I have medical records showing she stitched her own wound because your medic refused to treat her. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. I have everything. Greer's legs buckled. He caught himself on Hollister's arm, but Hollister was shaking too badly to help. Sir, Greer said, if we could just discuss this privately. Privately. Vance laughed again. You want privacy? After what you did to her in front of 300 soldiers. He turned to Celine. Captain Ashford, front and center. She walked forward slowly, her movements precise and controlled. She stopped in front of Vance and saluted. Sir? At ease, Captain. He studied her face, the bruises that were still fading the shaved head, the calm eyes that had seen all of this coming. You want to tell me why you didn't just reveal yourself when you arrived? Orders, sir. I was sent to evaluate this facility's treatment of recruits. To do that effectively, I needed to experience it firsthand. And your evaluation? Celine turned to look at Greer and Hollister. This facility is corrupt from the top down. The commanding officers abuse their power systematically. They sabotage equipment, falsify records, and physically assault recruits who don't meet their arbitrary standards. They have created an environment where harassment is encouraged and complaints are punished. She paused. My recommendation is immediate shutdown and criminal prosecution of the officers responsible. Vance nodded slowly. I concur. He gestured to his security team. Arrest Lieutenant Colonel Greer and Sergeant Major Hollister. Charges conduct unbecoming abuse of authority assault, falsification of records, and anything else the JAG can make stick. 2 soldiers moved forward with handcuffs. Greer backed away, his hands raised. You can't do this. I have rights. I have connections. My family. Your family can visit you in Leavenworth. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists. Hollister didn't resist. He seemed to have shut down completely, his eyes vacant, his body moving on autopilot as they cuffed him and led him away. The parade ground remained silent. 300 recruits stood in formation, watching their tormentors being dragged off in chains. And in the middle of it all stood Celine Ashford, her shaved head gleaming in the morning sun, her face completely expressionless. She had won, but she wasn't finished. Vance turned back to her. Captain, I'm assuming command of this facility temporarily. I want you to oversee the transition. With respect, sir, I have one more piece of business to handle. What's that? She turned to face the formation. 300 faces stared back at her. Some confused, some terrified, some relieved that the nightmare was finally over. She walked down the first row slowly, her eyes moving from face to face. She stopped in front of the bleached woman who had soaked her mattress on the first night. "What's your name?" The woman's voice shook. "Private Torres, ma'am." "Private Torres, you led the group that beat me in the latrines. Do you remember what you said to me?" Torres was crying, now tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. You didn't know I was someone important. That's what you're sorry for. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry because now there are consequences." Celine leaned closer. "If you had beaten some other recruit, some real nobody, would you be sorry then?" Torres couldn't answer. "That's what I thought." Celine stepped back. "You're not being arrested, Private Torres. None of you are being arrested. What you did was terrible, but you were following the example set by your leadership. You were doing what this place taught you to do." She raised her voice so everyone could hear. "But I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember what it feels like when the people you abused turn out to be more powerful than you. I want you to remember this feeling every time you're tempted to look down on someone because they seem weak or different or unimportant." She walked back to the center of the formation. Because you never know who you're really dealing with. You never know what someone has survived or what they're capable of. You never know if the person you're treating like garbage today will be the person deciding your fate tomorrow. She looked at Torres. "I'm giving you a chance to be better. Don't waste it." Then she turned and walked away, leaving 300 soldiers standing in stunned silence. General Vance fell into step beside her. "That was generous," he said quietly. "That was practical," she replied. "Punishing the followers doesn't fix the system. You have to change the leadership." "And you think they'll actually change?" She glanced back at the formation. "Some of them will. Some of them will remember this day for the rest of their lives and become better officers because of it. And the ones who don't..." Celine smiled. It was the first real smile she had allowed herself since arriving at Fort Ironclad. "The ones who don't will make the same mistakes again. And when they do, someone like me will be there to stop them." She paused at the edge of the parade ground, looking out over the base that had tried so hard to break her. "That's how it works, General. That's how it has always worked. The strong prey on the weak until someone stronger comes along to teach them better." She touched her shaved head absently. "They wanted to strip away everything that made me look special. My hair, my record, my rank. They thought if they could make me look like nothing, I would become nothing." Her hand dropped to her side. "They didn't understand that everything they took away was just window dressing. The real me, the thing that made me dangerous, was never something they could shave off, or lock away, or beat out of me." She looked at Vance. "It's in here." She tapped her temple. "And here." She tapped her heart. "And they never even knew it was there?" Vance nodded slowly. "The Pentagon is going to want a full debrief." "I know. There will be questions about your methods, about why you let them go as far as they did. I know that too. You could have stopped this at any time. You could have revealed yourself on day one and none of this would have happened." Celine was quiet for a moment. "If I had revealed myself on day one, Greer and Hollister would have been on their best behavior. They would have hidden their true nature. And 6 months from now, when I was gone and forgotten, they would have gone right back to destroying lives." She shook her head. "I needed them to show me who they really were. I needed evidence that couldn't be explained away or covered up. I needed them to hang themselves with their own rope. And they did. They always do. People like that can't help themselves. Give them enough time and enough rope, and they'll tie the noose every time." Vance's aide approached with a satellite phone. "Sir Washington on line 1. The general took the phone, glancing at Celine one more time. For what it's worth, Captain, I'm glad you're on our side. She watched him walk away, already talking to people whose names she would never know about things that would never be written down. The sun was climbing higher now, burning away the morning mist. Behind her, Fort Ironclad was beginning its transformation. MPs were securing evidence. JAG officers were taking statements. The machinery of military justice was grinding into motion. And somewhere in a holding cell, Greer and Hollister were finally understanding what they had done. They had shaved the head of a ghost. They had locked away a weapon. They had tried to break something that was designed to be unbreakable. And now they would pay the price. Celine walked toward the barracks where her duffel bag still sat on that rusted bunk. She had work to do. The mission was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Someone had to rebuild this place. Someone had to teach these recruits what real leadership looked like. Someone had to make sure that what happened here would never happen again, and that someone was going to be her. The holding cells beneath Fort Ironclad's administrative building had never held officers before. Greer sat on the concrete bench, his head in his hands, still wearing the uniform he had pressed so carefully that morning for the general's inspection. The medals on his chest seemed to mock him now, each one a reminder of the career he had just watched crumble to dust. Hollister paced the adjacent cell like a caged animal, his boots scraping against the floor with every turn. "This isn't over," Hollister muttered. "This can't be over. I've got 23 years in. 23 years. They can't just throw that away because of some what?" Greer's voice was hollow. "Some captain with clearance levels we didn't even know existed. Some woman we shaved and starved and beat because we thought she was nobody. We didn't know." "That's the point, you idiot." Greer looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "We didn't know. We never asked. We just saw someone who looked weak and decided to destroy her." Hollister stopped pacing. "She set us up. From the moment she walked through those gates, she was setting us up." "No." Greer shook his head slowly. "We set ourselves up. She just gave us the rope." A door clanged open somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps approached. Both men straightened instinctively as Celine Ashford appeared outside their cells, still in her dirty recruit uniform, her shaved head catching the harsh fluorescent light. She carried 2 manila folders. "Gentlemen," she said quietly, "I thought you deserved to know exactly what's happening." Hollister lunged at the bars. "You did this. You destroyed everything. I gave you every opportunity to treat me like a human being." Her voice didn't rise. "Every single day you had a choice. You chose wrong, every time." She opened the first folder. "Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Greer. The JAG is filing charges for 17 separate counts of conduct, unbecoming 12 counts of assault, 8 counts of falsifying official records, and 3 counts of conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation." Greer's face went gray. "The financial audit is also complete. Interesting reading. Over the past 6 years, you've diverted approximately $400,000 from the training budget into personal accounts. Did you really think no one would notice? That money was for operational expenses. It was for your beach house in Florida. We have the deed. Your wife's signature is on it." Greer's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Celine turned to Hollister. "Sergeant Major Drake Hollister. Your charges include everything the lieutenant colonel is facing, plus 14 additional counts of physical assault against recruits, 6 counts of sexual harassment, and 1 count of attempted murder." Hollister's face twisted. "Attempted murder? What the hell are you talking about?" "Private Jessica Mendez. 3 years ago. She reported you for inappropriate conduct. 2 days later, she fell from the obstacle course tower. Broke her spine. Paralyzed from the waist down. That was an accident." We have a witness now. Someone who saw you loosen the safety harness before she climbed." Hollister grabbed the bars so hard his knuckles went white. "That's a lie? That's a goddamn lie. Who would say that? Who would? Private Torres, the woman with the bleached hair. She saw everything. She's been carrying that guilt for 3 years, and today she finally told the truth." The color drained from Hollister's face. "Torres wouldn't. She's loyal. She's terrified of spending the rest of her life knowing she helped cover up a crime. People talk when they're scared, Sergeant Major. They talk to save themselves." Celine closed both folders. "You wanted to know what happens next? Here it is. Court-martial within 30 days. Maximum sentences for both of you. Greer, you're looking at 15 to 20 years. Hollister, if the attempted murder charge sticks, you'll die in Leavenworth." She turned to leave. "Wait." Greer's voice cracked. "Wait. Please." She stopped, but didn't turn around. "I have a family. Children. They didn't do anything wrong. If I cooperate, if I testify against others in the system, can you help them?" Celine was quiet for a long moment. "Your children will be taken care of. Your pension is forfeit, but the military doesn't punish families for the sins of their fathers. And me, is there anything? You had 300 chances to show mercy, Lieutenant Colonel. You showed none. Why should I show you any?" She walked away without looking back. Behind her, Greer slumped against the wall of his cell, finally understanding that his life was truly over. Hollister screamed obscenities until his voice gave out. Neither of them heard the cell door at the end of the corridor open and close as Celine disappeared into the light. The administrative building had been transformed into a command center. MPs were everywhere, securing evidence, taking statements, coordinating with JAG officers who had been flown in from Washington. The scale of the investigation had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Fort Ironclad wasn't just corrupt. It was rotten to the core. General Vance stood at the center of the chaos, fielding calls from Pentagon officials who wanted answers and didn't want to wait. "Yes, Senator, I understand your concerns. No, Senator, I can't comment on ongoing investigations. Yes, Senator, I'm aware that this reflects poorly on the entire military. I assure you we're handling it." He hung up, and immediately his phone rang again. "Sir." Lieutenant Chen appeared at his elbow. "Captain Ashford is asking to see you." "Send her in." Celine entered the room looking like she'd been awake for a week, which wasn't far from the truth. But her eyes were still sharp, still focused. "General, I have an update on the secondary investigation." "Secondary investigation." She handed him a tablet. "Fort Ironclad isn't the only facility with this problem. Greer and Hollister were part of a network. 7 training bases across the country, all connected. Same patterns, same abuse, same cover-ups." Vance scrolled through the data, his face growing darker with each page. "My God. This goes up to 3 generals, 12 colonels, 47 officers at various ranks, all connected, all protecting each other." "How did you find this?" "I've been tracking them for 2 years. Fort Ironclad was the final piece of evidence I needed." Vance looked up from the tablet. "You mean this whole operation? Everything you went through here, it wasn't just about this base?" "No, sir. This base was the tip of the iceberg. Now we have enough to bring down the whole thing." He stared at her for a long moment. "The Pentagon isn't going to like this." "The Pentagon doesn't have to like it. They just have to deal with it. There will be pushback, political pressure. People will try to bury this." "Let them try." Celine's voice was steel. "Every file is backed up in 17 locations. Every piece of evidence has been distributed to trusted parties. If anything happens to me, if this investigation gets shut down, everything goes public. Every news outlet in the country, every foreign government that would love to see us embarrassed. Everything." Vance set the tablet down slowly. "You've been planning this for a long time." Since I was 22. Since I watched a commanding officer destroy a soldier's career because she wouldn't sleep with him. Since I learned that there was no one to report these things to because everyone was in on it. She met his eyes. She met his. I became the person who could stop it, whatever that required, however long it took. And now we finish it. The news broke 3 hours later. Every major network interrupted their programming to report the story. Military corruption scandal reaches highest levels. Training base abuse uncovered by undercover officer. Pentagon launches massive internal investigation. Celine watched the coverage from a corner of the command center, her face expressionless. Lieutenant Chen approached her hesitantly. "Ma'am, there are reporters at the gate, dozens of them. They're asking for you by name." "Tell them no comment." "Ma'am, with respect, this could be your moment. You could tell your story. The whole country would. The story isn't about me." She turned to face him. "The moment this becomes about one person, it loses its power. This is about a system that failed, a system that needs to be rebuilt. If I become the hero of this story, then people will think the problem is solved when I disappear. But you deserve recognition. After everything you went through. I went through what thousands of other soldiers have gone through. The only difference is that I had the power to fight back. Most of them don't." She looked back at the screens where her photograph had appeared next to the headline. "Make sure the focus stays on the victims, on the soldiers who were destroyed by this system, on the ones who didn't survive. That's the story that matters." Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." He walked away, and Celine stood alone in the midst of the chaos, watching the world finally pay attention to what she had spent years trying to expose. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. The first of the recruits came to her that evening. Private Torres, her bleached hair hanging limply around her face, her eyes swollen from crying. She stood at attention outside Celine's temporary office, unable to meet her eyes. "Ma'am, I needed to. At ease, Private. Sit down." Torres collapsed into the chair across the desk, her composure crumbling. "I testified against Hollister, about what he did to Mendez. I saw it happen and I never said anything. For 3 years I kept quiet because I was scared." "You spoke up now. That took courage." "It took you. Seeing what they did to you, seeing how you never broke it, made me realize what a coward I've been." Celine leaned forward. "You're not a coward, Private. You were a victim of the same system that hurt everyone else. The only difference is that you had power you didn't know how to use. The other recruits hate me now. They say I'm a snitch. They say what frightened people always say when someone tells the truth. Give it time. Some of them will come around, some won't. That's not something you can control." Torres wiped her eyes. "What do I do now? How do I become someone I'm not ashamed of?" Celine was quiet for a moment. "You start by forgiving yourself. Not for what you did, but for what you didn't do. You were 20 years old when Mendez fell. You were scared. That's human. It doesn't feel human. It feels monstrous. The monsters don't feel guilt, Private. The fact that you're sitting here crying proves you're not one of them." Torres looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Do you really believe that?" "I believe that everyone deserves a second chance. I believe that what you do tomorrow matters more than what you did yesterday. And I believe that you have the potential to be an excellent soldier if you stop letting your past define your future." Torres straightened in her chair. "I want to be better. I want to make this right." "Then do it. Not for me, not for Mendez. For yourself. Because you deserve to live a life you're proud of." Torres stood and saluted. "Thank you, ma'am, for everything." She walked out, her shoulders a little straighter than when she came in. Celine watched her go, wondering if she had just witnessed the beginning of a real change. The parade ground was empty when Celine walked through it that night, her footsteps echoing off the silent buildings. The base felt different now. The oppressive weight that had hung over everything was lifting, replaced by something that felt almost like hope. She stopped at the spot where they had shaved her head. The metal stool was still there, forgotten in the chaos of the past 2 days. She picked it up, feeling its weight in her hands. Such a small thing, such a simple piece of furniture, and yet it represented everything this place had been. A tool of humiliation, a symbol of power abused. She carried it to the edge of the parade ground and set it down next to a waste container. Tomorrow, someone would throw it away, and that would be the end of it. A figure approached from the shadows. Couldn't sleep either. It was Corporal Jensen, the skinny kid that Greer had ordered her to beat. His nose was still swollen, still bearing the marks of the punch he had taken for her refusal. Too much to think about, Celine admitted. Jensen stood beside her, looking out over the base. I never thanked you for what you did, for not hitting me when they ordered you to. You don't need to thank me for basic decency. Basic decency. He laughed bitterly. Ma'am, I've been at 3 different training bases. I've never seen basic decency. I've seen people follow orders no matter how wrong they were. I've seen soldiers destroy each other just to stay on the good side of someone with rank. He turned to face her. What you did wasn't basic. It was extraordinary. And I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Celine didn't know what to say. She had spent so long being the weapon, being the tool that others pointed at targets, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen as something more. Jensen, what do you want to do with your military career? He blinked, surprised by the question. I don't know, ma'am. Survive, I guess. Get through training. Try not to get killed. That's not a career. That's existence. It's all I've ever known. She studied him for a moment. You protected the other recruits during the worst of it. I saw you. When Hollister was looking for someone to target you, drew his attention to yourself, so he'd leave the weaker ones alone. Jensen's face reddened. Anyone would have done that. No, they wouldn't. Most people protect themselves first. You protected others. That's rare. That's valuable. What are you saying? I'm saying that when this is over, when the new command structure is in place, I'm going to recommend you for leadership training. You have potential, real potential, the kind that doesn't come along often. Jensen stared at her. Ma'am, I'm nobody. I'm just a skinny kid from Oklahoma who joined the army because there weren't any jobs at home. You're what you choose to be. Nothing more, nothing less. She started walking back toward the barracks. Get some sleep, Corporal. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. Jensen watched her go, still processing what had just happened. For the first time in his life, someone had looked at him and seen something worth believing in. He stood alone in the darkness for a long time, wondering if it was possible that she was right, wondering if he could become the person she seemed to think he already was. The phone call came at 0400. Celine answered on the first ring. Captain Ashford. Captain, this is Director Morrison, National Security Council. We need to talk about your investigation. She sat up in her bunk, instantly alert. I'm listening. The evidence you've gathered is extensive, perhaps too extensive. There are people on your list who have connections, political connections, the kind that can make problems disappear. Is that a threat, Director? It's a reality check. You've done excellent work. The military is grateful, but there are limits to how far this can go. The limits are wherever the corruption ends, not before. Silence on the line. Captain, I'm trying to help you. If you push this too far, you'll make enemies you can't defeat. People who don't play by the rules you're accustomed to. I don't play by rules, Director. I play to win. This isn't a game. No, it's not. It's the lives of thousands of soldiers who deserve better than what they've been given. It's the careers of good officers who were destroyed because they wouldn't participate in corruption. It's justice. And justice isn't negotiable. Another long pause. You're making a mistake, Captain. Then it's my mistake to make. She hung up. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. They thought they could intimidate her. They thought she would back down if they applied enough pressure. They didn't know her at all. She pulled out her tablet and began composing a message. By the time the sun rose, 17 different journalists had received encrypted files containing evidence that couldn't be suppressed, couldn't be buried, couldn't be made to disappear. The war wasn't over. But she had just fired the shot that would make retreat impossible. For anyone. The files hit every major news outlet at exactly 0600. By 0630, the story had gone viral. By 0700, 3 senators had issued statements demanding immediate congressional hearings. By 800, the Pentagon's switchboard had crashed from the volume of calls. And by 900, Director Morrison's black SUV pulled through the gates of Fort Ironclad, flanked by 4 identical vehicles filled with men in dark suits who didn't smile. Celine watched them arrive from the window of the command center. General Vance stood beside her, his face grim. You know why they're here. I know. They're going to try to shut this down, classify everything, make it disappear. They can try. The convoy stopped. Morrison emerged from the lead vehicle, a tall man with silver hair and the cold eyes of someone who had made careers vanish with a single phone call. He walked toward the building with the confidence of a man who had never lost a battle. He was about to learn what losing felt like. The confrontation happened in Vance's office. Morrison didn't bother with pleasantries. Captain Ashford, you have committed multiple violations of national security protocols. You leaked classified information to unauthorized parties. You endangered ongoing intelligence operations. I exposed corruption that your office has been protecting for over a decade. Morrison's jaw tightened. That is a serious accusation. I have serious evidence. She pulled out her tablet and placed it on the desk between them. 6 months ago, your office received a report documenting abuse at Fort Ironclad. You buried it. 8 months before that, a similar report from Fort Henderson. Buried. 14 months before that, allegations against General Patterson at Camp Morrison. Also buried. She scrolled through the files. I have records of every complaint that crossed your desk, every investigation that was quietly closed, every victim who was silenced, transferred, or forced out of the military because they dared to speak up. Morrison's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. Those decisions were made for national security reasons. Those decisions were made to protect powerful men who happened to be your friends. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. General Patterson is your brother-in-law. Colonel Vickers plays golf with you every Sunday. Admiral Chen's daughter is engaged to your son. She leaned across the desk. This isn't national security. This is a protection racket. And it ends today. Morrison rose to meet her, his composure finally cracking. You think you can take me down? You think a few leaked files are going to matter? I have connections you can't imagine. I have power you can't comprehend. I can make your life a living... Sir. The voice came from the doorway. Lieutenant Chen stood there, his tablet in hand, his face pale but determined. Sir, you should see this. He turned the tablet around. The screen showed a live congressional hearing. The banner at the bottom read, Emergency Session, Military Corruption Investigation. And sitting at the witness table surrounded by cameras and microphones was Private Torres. Morrison's face went white. That's not possible. How did she... I sent her, Celine said quietly. Last night, with copies of everything. The Senate Armed Services Committee was very interested in what she had to say. On the screen, Torres was speaking, her voice steady despite the obvious terror in her eyes. I witnessed Sergeant Major Hollister sabotage Private Mendez's safety harness. I watched her fall. I heard her scream, and I said nothing for 3 years because I was afraid of what would happen to me if I spoke up. A senator leaned forward. Private Torres, who told you to keep silent. Everyone, sir. The entire chain of command. They said if I talked, I would be destroyed. They said no one would believe me. They said the people responsible had connections that went all the way to Washington. And do you have evidence to support these claims? Torres pulled out a thick folder. I have everything, sir. Names, dates, recordings, financial transactions, everything. Morrison grabbed for his phone. I need to make a call. Your phone won't work. Celine's voice was calm. I had the signal jammers activated 15 minutes ago. Standard security protocol for a facility under investigation. Morrison stared at her. You planned this. I've been planning this for 6 years. You're not the first person who tried to stop me. You won't be the last. But you will fail just like all the others. The door opened again. This time it was MPs, 4 of them with handcuffs. Director Morrison, the lead MP stepped forward. By order of the Senate Armed Services Committee, you are hereby detained pending investigation into obstruction of justice conspiracy and abuse of power. Morrison backed away. You can't do this. I have immunity. You have the right to remain silent. The MP grabbed his arm. I suggest you use it. They cuffed him. They let him out. And just like that, the man who had spent 15 years protecting predators was gone. Celine stood at the window, watching Morrison's SUV disappear through the gates this time, with its owner in the back seat in handcuffs. Vance approached her slowly. It's really over, isn't it? This part is over. The network is exposed. The key players are in custody. The evidence is public. But, she turned to face him, but systems don't change overnight. There will be resistance. There will be people who try to rebuild what we've torn down. There will be new predators who rise to fill the vacuum. So what do? We stay vigilant. We keep watching. We train the next generation to be better than we were. She looked back out the window. And when the next crisis comes, we'll be ready. The congressional hearings lasted 3 weeks. Celine testified for 4 days. She told them everything. The abuse she had witnessed, the systems that enabled it, the people who had protected the predators and punished the victims. She named names. She provided evidence. She held nothing back. When she was finished, the committee sat in stunned silence. Finally, the chairman spoke. Captain Ashford, on behalf of the United States Senate, I want to thank you for your courage. What you've done here today, what you've sacrificed, will save countless lives. With respect, sir, I didn't do this for thanks. I did it because it was right. Nevertheless, you deserve recognition. The President has authorized your immediate promotion to the rank of colonel. There's also been discussion of a Medal of Honor nomination. Celine shook her head. I appreciate the offer, sir, but I'd prefer if you used those resources elsewhere. Elsewhere, there are soldiers who were destroyed by this system. Careers ended. Lives ruined. Families broken. They deserve compensation. They deserve to have their records cleared. They deserve to know that their country finally believes them. The chairman nodded slowly. That can be arranged. There's one more thing. Name it. Fort Ironclad. I want to rebuild it. Not as a dumping ground for soldiers the military wants to forget, but as a model for what training facilities should be. A place where leadership is taught by example. Where abuse is never tolerated. Where every soldier, regardless of rank or background, is treated with dignity. The chairman glanced at his colleagues. That's a significant undertaking. Yes, sir, it is. You're willing to take it on after everything you've been through. Celine thought about the storage building where she had been locked away, the clippers that had taken her hair, the rain that had soaked her to the bone while everyone else stayed dry. She thought about Torres finally telling the truth after 3 years of silence. She thought about Jensen standing taller because someone had believed in him. Yes, sir, I am. The chairman smiled for the first time since the hearings began. Then it's yours, Colonel Ashford. Make us proud. 6 months later, Fort Ironclad reopened. The old sign had been replaced. The barracks had been renovated. The training facilities had been modernized. But the biggest changes weren't visible. Celine stood at the gates watching the first class of new recruits arrive. They looked nervous, uncertain the same way every recruit looked on their first day. But there was something else in their eyes, too. Hope. They had heard the stories. They knew what had happened here. They knew that this place had been transformed from a nightmare into something better. And they had chosen to come anyway. Lieutenant Torres appeared at Celine's side, not Private Torres anymore. She had been promoted twice in 6 months, her courage during the hearings earning her recognition she had never sought. The recruits are assembled, Colonel. Thank you, Lieutenant. Celine walked toward the formation, her boots crunching on the same gravel that had witnessed her humiliation all those months ago. Her hair had grown back, but she kept it short now. A reminder of what she had survived. A symbol of what she had overcome. She stopped in front of the recruits and let the silence stretch. My name is Colonel Celine Ashford. 6 months ago, I stood where you're standing now. I was shaved, beaten, starved, and locked in a storage building. I was called worthless. I was told I was garbage. She paused. The people who did those things to me are in prison now. The system that protected them has been dismantled. But the work isn't finished. It will never be finished. She walked down the line looking at each face. Some of you are here because you had nowhere else to go. Some of you are here because you believe in something bigger than yourselves. Some of you don't know why you're here yet. She stopped at the end of the line. It doesn't matter why you came. What matters is what you do now. Every day you will have choices to make. You will see others struggle, and you will decide whether to help them or ignore them. You will see injustice, and you will decide whether to speak up or stay silent. She turned to face them all. The old Fort Ironclad taught soldiers to be cruel, to follow orders without question, to destroy anyone who was different or weak. Her voice rose. That Fort Ironclad is dead. This place, the place you're standing in right now, teaches something different. Here you will learn that true strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting them. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it costs you everything. She touched her short hair. They shaved my head because they thought it would break me. They didn't understand that everything they could take away was never what made me strong. She pointed at her temple. Strength is here. She pointed at her heart. And here. She dropped her hand. They can't shave that away. They can't beat it out of you. They can't starve it or lock it up or make it disappear. She looked at the recruits one last time. You are not worthless. You are not garbage. You are soldiers, and soldiers protect each other. She stepped back. Dismissed. The formation broke apart, recruits moving toward their assigned barracks with something new in their posture. Something that looked like pride. Torres approached her. That was quite a speech, Colonel. It was the truth, nothing more. Still, I think you got through to them. Celine watched the recruits disappear into the barracks. Time will tell, Jensen appeared from the administrative building, now wearing the insignia of a second lieutenant. His leadership training was almost complete, and he had exceeded every expectation. "Colonel, you have a call from Washington, the Secretary of Defense." "Tell him I'll call back." Jensen hesitated. He said it was urgent. "It's always urgent with them." She smiled slightly. "Give me 5 minutes." Jensen nodded and headed back inside. Selena stood alone in the center of the parade ground, the same spot where they had shaved her head, where they had tried to strip away everything that made her who she was. The metal stool was gone. The clippers were gone. The men who had wielded them were in prison. But she was still here, still standing, still fighting. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. "Colonel Ashford, we have a situation at Camp Reynolds. Similar patterns to Fort Ironclad. Similar protection from above. Soldiers are being destroyed. No one is listening. Please help." She read the message twice. Then she forwarded it to General Vance with a single note. "We're not finished." Because they never would be. There would always be another Fort Ironclad. Another Camp Reynolds. Another place where power was abused and the vulnerable were crushed. And there would always be someone like her. Someone who refused to look away. Someone who couldn't be broken. Someone who understood that the real battle wasn't against any individual tyrant, but against the darkness that lived in human hearts. The darkness that made people believe they could treat others like garbage because no one was watching. She was watching now. She would always be watching. And anyone who thought they could abuse their power without consequences was about to learn the same lesson that Greer and Hollister and Morrison had learned. The lesson that 300 soldiers at Fort Ironclad had witnessed with their own eyes. The lesson that would echo through the military for generations to come. You never know who you're really dealing with. You never know what someone has survived. You never know who is standing in front of you, waiting for you to make a mistake. So treat everyone with dignity. Treat everyone with respect. Because the person you dismiss as nothing today might be the one who decides your fate tomorrow. Celine Ashford walked back toward the administrative building, ready to answer the secretary's call, ready to face whatever came next. Her hair would grow back. Her bruises had healed. But the fire inside her, the fire that had carried her through every moment of abuse and humiliation and pain, would never go out. It burned brighter now than ever before. And it would continue burning until every soldier in every base, in every corner of the military knew one simple truth. They were not alone. They were not forgotten. And they were never ever worthless. Because somewhere out there, someone was watching. Someone was listening. Someone was ready to fight for them. And that someone would never stand down.